Hello and welcome back to this episode of 5 Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green. It is a pleasure to be with you and to have you with us. We hope you all had a wonderful, enjoyable, and healthy holiday season. And we're looking towards 2021. We're looking forward. We don't want to look backward to a happy, a healthier, and safer year for all of us. And I am so glad to have my guest today. And my first obligation is to thank him for his understanding. We had a podcast interview scheduled, and I was still too sick to do it. And this is a busy guy. Wait till you hear this. This is not a long bio, but you'll see how busy he is. But this gentleman, I've been looking to get someone from the National Volunteer Fire Council, and I lucked out to get the chairman of the NVFC, Mr. Steve Hirsch. And let me tell you, he is a training officer for Sheridan County Fire District number 1, Thomas County Fire District number 4, and Grinnell Fire Department, all of which are 100% volunteer fire departments. He is the chair and the Kansas director of the National Volunteer Fire Council and is currently first vice chair of the Kansas State Firefighters Association after serving as secretary from 2000 to 2018. Too bad he couldn't hold an office in that department. His father started a rural fire district in north central Kansas in 1963, the year after he was born. Oh, you're still way younger than I am. So he grew up in the fire service. He is also the county attorney for Decatur County in northwest Kansas. He has a private law practice and serves as city attorney for 18 cities in Norton, Phillips, Graham, Mitchell, Rawlins, Decatur, Sheridan, Thomas, and Gove counties. And are they all in Kansas also, Steve?
They are.
They are in Kansas. So as you can tell my viewers and listeners, this is a busy guy. So Steve, welcome to the show. I am so happy and proud to have you with us today.
Well, that's good. Yeah, we probably should have added Grandpa to that list too, because that's the most important job I do.
Oh, first time or multiple?
No. There's 5 of them. And,
oh, God bless. I'm expecting my first one this spring.
It's an experience.
It's just watching our daughter who moved from New York after 11 years down here to South Florida, and they only live a mile and a half away. Watching her bloom, we see them often. It's a blessing. That's what it is.
It is.
To see, and I can't wait for that grandchild to show up. So, Steve, the background, the bio really tells us why you're so dedicated to the volunteer fire service. And as a volunteer, and I think, although I spoke with a couple of volunteers, a volunteer chief, you may know him, Anthony Correa. And Tony's a great guy, and he's been on. But I guess I've been so close to it because I didn't want to leave. I was forced out by an injury after 8 years. And as it turned out, life took another path, and I wasn't able to, even if I had been healthy, I had moved, and there was not a volunteer department in the area where we moved to here in South Florida. But it's very near and dear to my heart, as I explained to you. And we did a show with Tony and some other guests about a year and a half ago on recruitment and retention. It was very interesting. I think what Tony said first was, Steve, we got to rephrase that to retention and recruitment. And it's important. We know it's, in the time that when you and I were younger, most of the time there was one parent working, a mom was at home. Although my wife has worked since we married. We're 46 years along the line. But today, society has changed greatly. Both parents are usually working. At least one of them probably has a part-time job. The second one may even have a part-time job. And then there are the kids and after-school activities and everything else we have to do. It's not the same framework that you and I grew up in the volunteer service. And of course, we know that there are great departments out there, dedicated men and women who give their all, even if it's limited time, they still give their all to their communities. And yet we have concerns because of the way society is operating. So, of course, the first thing we need to talk about today is the elephant in the room. Usually my class that I teach, which, by the way, I was very fortunate a year ago to have submitted my my class to the NVFC for the school, but unfortunately the date that it was scheduled for was, I was going to be out of town, as it turned out, for my daughter's wedding. So
Ah,
I look
and I
forward to, I look,
and I suppose that was more important.
yeah, a little bit, a little bit. My class is usually called the elephant in the firehouse, but this is
Uh-huh.
the elephant in the room, and that's COVID. We've all been dealing with it since, almost 11 months now, I guess. We're getting close on 11 months. And it's affected all of us. You don't have to be a first responder to know how it's affected our society, with over 300,000 lost. And may their souls always be for a blessing. And yet we know that our first responders have given every ounce of their ability to help in the community, from the smallest rural department to the FDNY, the largest department in the nation, giving everything they could of themselves to help. And that goes also, not just, we have to include our call takers, our dispatchers, everybody who works, even our road rangers and our recovery operators. They're all first responders. And our brothers in blue and our brothers in EMS, brothers and sisters, we have to give them the accolade as well. What have you seen, how COVID has affected the volunteer corps in this country?
Well, I think it's important for us, when we've got lemons, to make lemonade. And boy, if the fire service didn't step up to that plate, I couldn't be prouder of them. When I see the pictures of the parades through towns to make sure that people have, some positivity in their communities. I see fire departments doing some, virtual reading of stories for kids. I see birthday parties where they show up with a fire truck. I see fire departments, career and volunteer alike, going out and getting groceries and medical supplies for the elderly and the homebound. How could you not be prouder of the fire service and what we have done? It's just been amazing. And yet, when I say amazing, and yet the reality is it shouldn't be amazing, because that's what we do every day. That's about helping our neighbors. Certainly in the volunteer fire service, it's neighbors helping neighbors in their time of need. And so the volunteer fire service stepped up and played a big role in that, as did the career service in a lot of places too.
Yeah, absolutely.
But there have been consequences to this COVID. And I think for a lot of us, we thought that maybe we were in for a few months, and now we're into it soon going to be a year. And depending upon which expert, and I use that term rather loosely, that you talk to, because I think it's just a guess in large measure.
Very much.
We may still be in this by the end of this year. It's had a huge impact on us. So let's talk about some of the ways that it has. Well, the first is a lot of our volunteer fire departments, not necessarily, I'm out in Kansas. All of our fire departments, as far as I know, are almost totally funded by tax support.
Sure.
And so we've not had the issue with finances. That's not to say that we don't have fire departments that do fundraisers, but that's not their sole source of support. Unlike primarily in the eastern half of the United States, where fundraising is almost as important a mission of the fire service there as doing fire suppression and running medical calls.
Absolutely. Both my departments, one was in Greensboro, the other was in upstate New York. And matter of fact, the funny thing was, when I was there in upstate New York, the nonprofit I worked for sent me to New York City for a seminar on fundraising for a couple of days. So I went to the first one, and while it didn't apply, one of the programs they had, it didn't apply to the nonprofit I worked for as the executive director. But I said, I think this could work for the firehouse, for the fire department I was in. And we got in New York State, if your homeowner's insurance is issued by a company whose home office is out of the state of New York, there's what's called the 2%. And that's, like, as you said, tax funding. We got 2% from our fire district.
Right.
And then we had a little fire district. Then we had the town of DeWitt we had a contract with. And so I said, we did, always did a Sunday, a Saturday Santa in December, and people would make donations. Thank you you came to our house for that call, and we appreciate it. But they never did anything. So this was a direct mail program. So I brought it to them, and I said, listen, and it's funny, I was being groomed in North Carolina to be an officer. I didn't know about it then. I didn't know about it till 3 years ago when I had the wonderful opportunity of seeing my former chief at his home in Greensboro. And he said, "Do you ever wonder why I kept sending you to those fire colleges?" And I said, yeah, me and Rich were both wondering why. He says, "Because I saw your dedication, boys. I knew you guys were going to be officers here." Fortunately, he left half a year before I did. He became a police officer in DC, and my wife and I moved to upstate. And so I went to the department and I said, "Look, why don't we try this?" He said, "Well, how much will it cost?" It's gonna cost too much. I said, "Well, no. All you're buying is a mailing list and envelopes, and I can bring a meter here so we can get metered rate for postage."
Right.
So they said, well, they had to go through a whole business meeting and stuff like that. We got it approved. First year, first time out of the gate, 17 grand. Second year, I was gone, over 30 grand. So when it comes to fundraising, and because all my nonprofits I've needed to have been for fundraising, and even what I'm doing now with Five Alarm Task Force Corp, it's a nonprofit to raise money to help our firefighters and hopefully other first responders in dire need. And we're happy we've done it. Matter of fact, this is a place you'll know, Ellenville, Kansas.
Yes, Ellenwood. Yes. In fact, I was going to mention that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, as soon as I saw Chief Billy Goldfetter's secret list of that accident with that DUI, and I have no patience with DUIs at all, none whatsoever. I saw my first 3 months in the fire service as a volunteer, that more than anybody needed to ever see, and because of DUI. And I said to, you might know Andy Starnes, Battalion Chief Andy Starnes from Charlotte, who's one of our leading experts in tick training today across the country, and Nick Higgins, who is the co-founder, I think, and editor of the Firehouse Tribune, and they're both on my board of directors. And I said, "Hey guys, why don't we kick off with helping Ellenwood?" I have his name right here, Chief
Chris Comark.
Chris Comark, right? I have it right in front of me, and it was Chief Craig Duke up in
Topeka.
Capital, right? Topeka, right? I spoke with first, yeah, and we sent him a check.
Yep. And just so your listeners know the story, it wasn't a firefighter who was a DUI.
No, right, exactly.
It was a civilian who decided to take out a fairly good chunk of their station when he managed to enter it with his pickup.
Yeah, a heavy duty pickup, so I heard.
Yes.
And of course damaged both apparatus inside as well.
Right.
But we knew that this was going to be a real tough story. And first I spoke with Chief Duke, and then I spoke with Chief Carmack, and he said, "Well, why would you do this?" I said, "Because it's who we are and what we do. We're brothers and sisters. This is what we started this nonprofit for, and you guys are going to need help." I said, "I wish we could help more, but we hope this will help you out." And I finally got a call back from him. I think it was just 2 or 3 weeks ago, maybe the beginning of December, and he apologized for being late. He says, "But I can't tell you what it meant to us and the folks in the department to get that check, and how much it meant for us, because we're not done. There's a lot of negotiating with insurance and going on like that." He goes, "But I'll tell you something, for them to see this check come in from somebody they don't even know, but they know there are other firefighters, meant a great deal to them."
Yep.
And that was probably one of our proudest moments in starting this nonprofit this past fall.
Yeah, after you had mentioned that, Chief Comark is one of our officers in our state association.
Oh, wonderful.
And met a good friend for over 20 years. So, we had a nice discussion about it. And I told him I was getting ready to do a podcast with you guys.
Oh, good. Please give him my best next time you talk to him.
I certainly will. I'll see him not this weekend, but the following weekend.
Oh, great.
Well, I guess back on the fundraising, I said, our department, we're property tax funded. There are a lot of fire departments that are, especially city fire departments, that are funded in part with sales tax, and those folks are. I don't mean to say that people who are tax funded aren't going to have problems, because if they're sales tax funded, they've got issues too.
Oh, sure.
So, frankly, what I've said before is that for 2020, which is now past, praise the Lord for that. I didn't think the problem was going to be in 2020. I think it's 2021 because a lot of those departments had the money in the bank to get them through 2020, but they were raising money for 2021. And I think it's going to be a big issue for a lot of departments. It's going to cause some of them to fail, quite frankly. I'm pretty sure of that. And then, so how does that, what's that look like to the civilian? Well, that means that if their department's out of business and somebody else has to provide coverage to them, it's going to take longer for a fire truck to get to their house when it's on fire. It's going to take longer for a fire department to get there when they're upside down in their car in a wreck, and it's going to take longer for the ambulance to get there when they're having a heart attack. So we have to make sure that we're explaining that to the public too, that it isn't just about the fire department, it's about the service that we provide to them. And as long as if we can educate them and make sure they've got good information, then they'll start talking to the policymakers and make sure that departments are properly funded in this interim period. We're going to get over this. In fact, we'll come out better than what we were. We'll come out stronger than what we were. But we've got a rough patch to get through, no doubt, in terms of finance.
Right. Well, I'm going to tell you something. I'm going to put myself out there, and if I'm well and anybody needs some help with like a direct mail, let me know, and I'll be happy to reach out and help that department. Been there, done that, and I gave you proof. It's proof positive that it can work. Can't guarantee it works, but with good preparation and good information, we can hopefully maybe help somebody out.
Yep, I'm sure there will be people knocking at your door for that. Other ways that we've been affected besides financially, obviously, I think our response capabilities in some places have been diminished. We've got volunteer firefighters, and don't get me wrong, I'm going to try and explain that statement a little bit, but we have volunteers who themselves have had COVID and have been unable to respond. We have firefighters who have obviously other jobs who can't respond on their volunteer capacity because of their regular job. They can't risk losing their job because of that. I think there's been a number of reasons that's been very difficult. In fact, there's been some places where we know whole companies have been shut down because they've had enough people involved with the company who have had COVID that they just simply couldn't respond, period. So then they had to wait on their neighbor to pick up the slack. And I mean, that's very real. But the National Volunteer Fire Council has a volunteer firefighter support fund, and we expanded typically that has been for firefighters who suffered an uninsured loss in a nationally declared disaster area. We actually expanded that about a year ago, I think, to firefighters who lost their home in a fire. And then early in 2020, we expanded that to include those that were suffering financially from COVID. And I don't remember now how many applications we got, but and it wasn't a lot of money, a couple $300, but every little bit helps. And what was amazing to me was I read those applications, and I read every one of them, and the stories about mom had lost her job, dad had lost his job, the kids were having a difficult time getting schooling. And yet what I saw on a number of those applications was people saying, I've got more time to respond to calls now out of my company than what I did before. I mean, how amazing is that?
Right.
They were hurting themselves financially, but yet they were still willing to step up and commit even more time and effort to help out their neighbors. I mean, that's what the fire service is all about.
Exactly, dedication.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier, neighbors helping neighbors in their time of need. That's the slogan that's actually on the command vehicle at Hoisington, Kansas, which is in the same county as Ellenwood, that we talked about earlier. And I use that phrase a lot because I think that's sums up the volunteer fire and EMS service in one sentence: neighbors helping neighbors in their time of need.
It truly is. Been there and done that, and you're absolutely right. We're neighbors. We come together. We give of our time. Nobody likes getting awoken at 2:00 in the morning to the horns going off or the sirens or the pagers, but we took an oath.
We did.
And we take an oath to do the best of our ability. Nobody's asking us to become Superman or Batman or Aquaman. They just want us to do to the best of our ability.
Right.
And I would say for 99.9% of the volunteers I've met at conferences and in my time, dedication is the family, faith, family, and dedication to the task.
Very much so.
Is what they're about.
Yep. And, you know, we know that statistically and anecdotally, we know that some departments were having a difficult time being able to recruit and retain firefighters, or retain and recruit, as you said earlier. I think that's appropriate. It's pretty difficult to recruit firefighters in the midst of a pandemic, especially if you're not meeting. Now, for us, for my department, we meet every week. We met for about 6 to 8 weeks virtually, and we've been back together since then because we've been able to.
That's great.
But we were able to recruit people while we were doing virtual training, and you know, that's recruitment for us. Is our best recruiter is our other members of our fire department, you know. And so, you know, even though we were virtual, we would tell these people who were potential candidates, hey, here's the Zoom code, get on the meeting tomorrow night. And it worked. It worked quite well.
What a great idea. What a great idea. I think people kept thinking of Zoom as just a way of meeting, not being able to bring people in.
Right.
And now hopefully those who are watching this and listening to this and can say, holy smokes, we never thought of that. We're still doing virtual. Why don't we try some recruitment?
Sure. We did a virtual hands-on. Now that's challenging, but a good friend of mine down there in Georgia, the president of the Georgia State Firefighters Association, Dave Bullard, and one of his members of his department did a forcible entry drill for us. And they had a couple of cameras, and, you know, it's not quite the same,
right?
But it's better than nothing, you know, because I will tell you, one of the things, and in fact, I was talking with Ron there at the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation here a couple of weeks ago. One of the things that I'm really concerned about, obviously the other side effect of this COVID is a lot of places haven't been able to get together and do hands-on training, haven't been able to be together as a group. And I'm concerned that lack of training, the lack of keeping those skills sharp may lead to injuries and deaths down the road. The lack of finance is also potentially going to lead to injuries and deaths down the road too, because we're going to start prioritizing the things that we do, and hopefully those are not health related things for our firefighters. Hopefully they're not safety gear that they need to be buying.
Right.
But training is also important. So I've been kind of doing a little bit of research. You know, I'm in a little department. My fire department covers 900 square miles. We're the only fire department in the county. So, you know, we have 20 or 30 mile responses to some locations in the county. County of 2,500 people, and we have about 105 volunteer firefighters countywide.
How many stations do you have?
9 stations.
Oh, okay.
6 of those are actually outpost stations that just have a brush rig. The other 3 are structural stations. But you know, I try to be as much on the cutting edge, which we try not to make it the bleeding edge, but try to be a little bit on the cutting edge with some of this stuff. So I've been doing a little bit of research about virtual training, and, you know, there just isn't a whole lot out there. There's some programs, but the really good ones that are there are pretty pricey. And so we're still kind of running some numbers through, trying to figure out how we can make this work from a virtual environment. Hopefully this will be over soon, but I think, you know, Zoom training and virtual training, as much as I dislike it, it's probably here with us for the rest of our lifetimes, I suspect. So,
And it's better than no training at all.
It certainly is better, but it may be like the fundraising stuff that you were talking about. Why was there resistance to that? Because we haven't ever done it that way before. You know.
Well, we know. Look, we know the two key traits of the fire service. Volunteer crew makes no difference.
Right. 200 years of tradition unimpeded by progress. Right.
We can't stand change, and we can't stand status quo.
But you know, I mean, we kid a lot about that, but yet at the same time, you know, when my dad started out, we were using deuce and a half and 5-ton military equipment and Jeeps, and now we have commercially produced baffled tankers, good aerials. You know, we say that a lot in a joking way, but it's not really totally true that way. And then by the same token, sometimes there's things that we do the same way we've always done them because that is what works.
Right, exactly. It's like, you know, I've used that example, like the Halligan.
Right.
A friend of mine has a new tool that, and we've become close friends. Created a tool called the Nesta Bar. It gives you a fulcrum point right there, and you don't need a second tool. You can do it with that. But listen, the Halligan, since it was invented, has been a magnificent tool for us.
Right.
For, what is it, 50 years, maybe 50 years already?
Yep, or more, yeah.
Yeah, or more. Every new firefighter, whether you're a career or a volunteer, learns about the Halligan bar and learns how to use a pry bar and a Halligan bar as needed. Yeah, you know, in my day, in your early days too, the Hirsch tool had just come out.
Right.
And none of the fire departments in our county had it. It was in the back of the command car of the EMS operations director.
Yep.
So he was the one who had to show up with it, but he didn't have time. You know, two friends of mine, we were doing some of them on our show, and now they're going to make their own podcast. They're both good instructors, fire instructors. Well, one's a captain and one was a captain and resigned his commission to go to another department and start as a basic firefighter. But I saw him teach as well. And they have their podcast is called Make Do, not DUE, DO, because 80% of American firefighters combined, out of the 1.2 million of us, 80% of us work in basically suburban areas.
Right.
We don't have, on an active alarm, we don't have 6 pieces of apparatus coming at one time.
Right.
You might be on that first tanker or that first engine where there's a driver, an officer, and one other person on the rig.
If you're lucky.
If you're lucky. And when you get there, you can't say, okay, well, we'll just hook up the hydrant and see what happens. No, you got to start to do what you have to do. You have to make do with what you have.
Yep.
And that's the lesson that we all have to learn today. Sometimes we have to make do with less, and sometimes we're blessed with a little bit more.
Yep.
But you have to be ready to do what you have to do when you have to do it.
Absolutely.
And that's what it's about.
Yep.
Well, I think we've really covered that COVID. All we can, as you said, hopefully we're heading down a clearer road. I'm not sure about other places. Here in South Florida, it's a road with many, many bumps.
Right.
Because there was no setup down here. Suddenly, all of a sudden, it was open with a telephone number and websites, which immediately crashed. Both the telephone systems and the websites crashed. Supposedly, one of them came back up over this weekend. And if you don't live in a residential community, meaning one of the retirement communities that are all over South Florida and all over the state of Florida, then even my brother, who moved down here 10 years ago, called me the other night and said, yeah, they're starting Monday. I said, oh, they're going to do it by your division assignments? He goes, nope. First come, first serve, 500 shots a day for 8 days. I said, that's going to be a mess. He goes, yeah, I know.
Yep.
I know.
But, you know, my Christian analogy to that is that, you know, the folks from Israel were wandering around in the wilderness for 40 years. And finally, Moses said, let's get up and go. And, you know, there was an awful lot of complaining and a lot of hardships that they faced as they were trying to get there. And he told them, you know, keep moving. And pretty soon they come to the water and, you know, what are we going to do now? This is in our way. The water's in our way and the army's behind us and we're doomed. We should have stayed where we were at. And Moses kept telling them, just keep moving forward, and the seas parted and away they went. And I think that's a good analogy for here is we just have to keep moving forward. And that's what the fire service is going to do. You know, I was telling somebody the other day, December 7th, 1941, we lost some firefighters that day. We lost a lot of good citizens that day. But did that keep us from responding on December 8th to fires? No. Did we suffer huge losses on September 11th of 2001? We certainly did. But the ambulances still rolled out of the door the next day, because that's what we do. We're committed to that. And just as Moses kept telling you, got to keep moving forward. I'm not pretending to be Moses, but I'm telling you, we just got to keep moving forward.
Hey, you're talking to a 50-year plus Jewish educator.
Mm-hmm.
So who almost became a rabbi.
Except, okay. All right.
Except I wound up in Greensboro instead and became a volunteer firefighter. It was all by chance. It was never supposed to happen. I'd married firefighters from the time I met my first one at the age 7 when they came to my house for a little woods fire in our backyard. And I said, these are great. And I had my parents drive me to every firehouse. Then when I had my bike, I was riding to every firehouse in my community and the other communities. Then when I had my license, bam, I was all over Greater Boston. Visiting every firehouse I could. And
the mission is the same whether you're a rabbi or a volunteer firefighter.
Exactly. And it was great helping. There were a couple of cases where the Jewish chaplain of our department up in Syracuse was in town when there was two of firefighters lost members of the family. And I stepped in because that was part of my responsibility at the center I worked at. It's a tough job to do, but it's the same thing. You're dedicated to help the people, the survivors, the family. It's a tough job. It's a tough time for them. And God blessed me with the shoulders and the ears big shoulders and big ears to be able to listen to people and help them and assuage some of the sorrow and that. And one of the things I did to do that, I learned from a good friend, was I stopped giving eulogies at funerals. Instead, I do celebrations of life.
Yes.
And I'm happy to say that probably in the last 20 years, there hasn't been a funeral I've officiated at where I didn't have people laughing and crying with happy tears rather than sad tears.
Yep.
Because I always want to tell good stories about the person who we lost and not remember the difficult times. I always talk about the funny stuff and the good stuff.
From the fire service standpoint, though, we need to quit waiting until we have funerals.
Right. Exactly. We do.
We need to tell people how much we appreciate them while they're still living.
That's for damn sure. That's for damn sure. All right. I think we have a good place for a break. So folks, we're going to take a break here. If you're watching us on the video, you're not going to see anything different, but we're going to be, for those of you on the audio, we'll be right back right after these words. So please stay tuned. And welcome back. If you're listening to the audio of our podcast today, my guest is Steve Hirsch, the chair of the National Volunteer Fire Council. And he's a busy man, and we're very lucky to have time with him today. And we talked in our first segment about how COVID affected the volunteer fire service and us in general. Because, you know what, it doesn't make any difference if you're a firefighter, if you're a law enforcement officer, you're an EMS, you're a sanitation worker, you're a secretary, you're a doctor, you're a nurse, all of us, every one of us has been affected by COVID since March of 2020, really. And I just remembered something that I should have mentioned in that first segment, was that on New Year's Eve, I was watching the national news on Thursday night, and one of the items was, it was a year ago today, they said, that we had first word of a strange new virus in Hunan, China, December 31st of 2019. Yeah. And that really kind of like was a sting. It's like when you get a shot, doesn't kill you, but doesn't feel great either.
Right.
And to feel that, oh my God, it's been that long that this thing has been around, and here we are. But okay, so we've covered that topic. Now we're going to talk to a topic that we brought up briefly, and that is the concept, as my good friend Chief Tony Correa says, retention and recruitment, and others just simply say recruitment and retention. So where is the NVFC with that, and what are we doing to help, especially, yes, in COVID, but in general, because we know, as we opened up the show, that society has changed, and volunteerism, not just in the fire service, by the way, folks, volunteerism across the country has dropped dramatically in the last 10 years. Synagogue and church volunteerism is dropped, as is attendance. public service organizations in our communities have lost volunteers as well. It's not because people are bad and they don't want to help, but things have happened in our lives over the last 10, 15, 20 years that society has changed, and there's only so much time in a day that we have. And we can only, it's like a pie. You can cut it up. You don't have to cut it up and just put your face into it and try to eat as much as you can, or you cut it into slices. But one day you're going to get to that last slice, and that's the end of that pie. You don't want to run out, especially if you're the guy baking them and selling them.
Right.
So we need to keep baking those pies with our volunteers and trying to bring as many in as we can. So what's happening today?
Well, we certainly know, again, statistically and anecdotally, we know that some departments have had a difficult time recruiting people. You look at the report that came out of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania here about a year and a half ago. The numbers are just staggering of what's happened in the last 30 years. But, you know, again, it's amazing to me, and I think you're right on the money. I think society has changed a lot. I'm not sure that it is a lack of people wanting to volunteer as much as there's a lack of time to be able to volunteer.
Agreed.
Because, as you said before, you know, when my dad started in the fire service, and I'm not being sexist about it, it's just a fact of life, is the guys were able to go to fire meetings. They were able to respond to calls because mom was there to take care of the kids. And that's just not reality today, because both mom and dad are working, regardless whether it's mom or dad that's volunteering for the fire department or EMS. It is a much more difficult situation for them. They just don't have the time to be able to do that because they're working multiple jobs, as you said. In our rural communities, the population in some places has declined. Sometimes the jobs are not there, so they're working out of town. So day staffing becomes a big issue for us. And I'm very blessed. I live in a community where, as I said earlier, we got 105 firefighters out of 2,500 people in the county, and I think that's a pretty amazing number. I don't have recruitment or retention issues at all. You know, we were able to recruit during the pandemic. We were able to recruit. I've had a new guy come on just last week. And it seems like about once every couple of weeks there'll be a new guy come on. And my members who have been on the department, they're my best recruiters because you know, you have to be honest with people. Is firefighting and EMS, is that for everybody? No, it's not, because we see things that civilians
should never see.
People shouldn't have to see,
right.
But they do, and they have to, because somebody's got to do the job, and we understand that. So we know that when we're recruiting, we're not going to keep them all. We just started our Explorer Post. In fact, right before COVID hit, we started our Explorer Post. We got 3 young men involved in that. We're going to get a woman, a young lady here before too long, as soon as she reaches the magic age. You know, the difficult thing with that is that you'll have them for a couple of years and then they go off to college. But, you know, it's just like fishing. If you can set that hook in them, even if they're not volunteering in my department, someplace they're going to be out there where they can volunteer in a fire EMS agency. So, and then we'll get somebody else's that they trained and got hooked on this as well.
It's interesting you mentioned that. When I went to Brandeis outside of Boston, and for 2 years I worked in the security department to earn a couple of bucks, and basically my job was to check the parking lots to make sure that the cars had the right decal for that lot, or issue a ticket, or make sure it had any decal, to park there if it wasn't in a guest spot. And then to keep my eyes open and report to one of the regular officers. I didn't have to wear a uniform or anything like that, but it was really, really gratifying to know that I was helping my college community. The school was only 9 miles from my home, but I lived at school, as my older brother did, and my younger brother went to the same school as well. And that to me, and even though it was basic pay, I mean, I wasn't doing it really for the money, it was pocket change, but I really enjoyed doing with that. And I was working at the radio station. And a number of years later, I pay make my annual contribution to the alumni fund, stuff like that. But a few years later, in one of the emails, I saw that Brandeis started its own EMS system for campus. And we live in the city. I mean, the college is in the city of Waltham, Mass, just a short drive from Boston. And Waltham has a great fire department. I visited its 4 stations. Well, probably 5 by now when I was at school. And I was so proud to see that first ambulance in the picture in that email, that the students who have volunteered to become, they started out in first aid, as I did way early, before I even thought about doing anything else. I was with the Red Cross doing every single class you could do. And then they became EMTs, and some even going to school full time at a prestigious college like Brandeis went on to become paramedics as well.
Yep. Yeah.
Just amazing. And I'm sure that this is not unique. I'm sure there are colleges and universities all over this country where young men and women have gone who maybe were explorers in their hometowns or were intrigued by something they saw on the campus, said, oh, that might be interesting. Maybe I'll try that. And are doing that as well.
Right.
And I'm hoping that those kids who are doing that today, because everybody younger than me is a kid, will use that experience to guide them in what they do beyond when they're finished with college and schooling and get in their own lives again, and think about reaching out and helping their communities.
Yeah, there's some really interesting programs out there. I know when I was at Kansas State University in Manhattan, the university had their own fire department. I didn't get involved in that. I kind of wished I had now, but I know that the Manhattan Fire Department, when they took over fire protection for the university, they established a live-in program, so they still have students that participate. I was out in Fairbanks 5-6 years ago, and I know that one of the stations in Fairbanks is primarily staffed, maybe exclusively staffed by, and I'm going to get it wrong, I don't know whether it's the University of Alaska, I believe there. I don't think it's Alaska State. I think it's the University of Alaska. That one station house is completely student run, and there's programs like that all across the country, I know, and they do a tremendous job in helping to fill the ranks. Because here's the thing, you might be in a career fire department and you think that, well, those volunteers are having trouble recruiting and retaining people, and what difference does that make to me? Well, it makes a big difference, because historically that's where a lot of the career firefighters have come from, has been from the volunteer side of the house. So we're drying up that pool as well. And I hear stories from career departments who, maybe 20 years ago had 10 positions and had 1,400 people apply for them, and now they have trouble getting enough people to apply for the positions that they have. I think it's a complete spin-off of what's going on in the volunteer fire service. So, we're married together. We all bleed. We all die the same way, right, in the same proportions. We all do the same tasks, one for a paycheck, one not. But we're all in this together, and I think it has some effect from the volunteer to the career side of the house as well. One of the things that I was just having a conversation last Thursday, I guess it was, with an individual, and about recruitment and retention. And one of the things that I've not done in my community, and I'm kind of intrigued by it, was a community in Nebraska using I think at Pierce, Nebraska, using their CERT teams as a recruitment tool as well. And I really had never thought about that. We've never established a CERT team in our community, but I can sure see benefits of that. I've seen firsthand the benefits of Explorer programs, getting those young people and then bringing them in when they reach age. But the CERT team, with the young kids, they'll move off to college. With CERT teams, those typically tend to be people who are lifetime residents there. So we'll be doing a little bit of stuff with that as well. I got to do a little bit of thinking about it, but I think departments ought to think about the use of their CERT teams and getting those integrated with their fire and EMS agencies too, because I think that might be a good recruitment tool.
Right. It sounds like a great tool. I mean, listen, for most of us, and you know this as well as I do, there's that bug that bites us. You know, as I said, when I went into that station in North Carolina, I was just driving by and I saw the nice brick building with big red shiny trucks in it. And I just stopped by to look at them, like I visited all through Massachusetts. In every state I've gone to, every time I travel, even that day that I went to New York, when I told you for that fundraiser, after the first day, I knew the second day had nothing to do with the synagogue. So I went to the firehouse and rode with them for 6 hours. And
Yeah.
I knocked on the door, showed them my badge. Come on in. You want to buy into lunch? And I said, no. I said, let me buy into lunch. He goes, no. You're a guest. Come on in. And I spent the day with some FDNY guys. Great, great. And they said, what's it like upstate? What do you do? How's your department? That's all they were asking me about. But a lot of those guys and gals are volunteers out on the island. They're paid great FDNY firefighters. But even when they go home, many of them, whether it's in Westchester County or out to Staten Island,
Yes.
they still volunteer because
Absolutely.
there's that bug that bites us.
Yep.
And like I said, I've been out of it since 1985 is when I got hurt and we moved. The fire service is still who I've defined myself by.
There are clearly
fire service.
There are clearly volunteer fire departments in Kansas which would maybe not cease to exist, but they certainly wouldn't function as well without career people who live in those communities participating in the volunteer side. No question about it. We're very thankful that people do that, and they do get that bug. Here's I'm going to throw this out as a thought too, and it's probably dangerous to do this, but
that's what we do, right?
Well, we got to get people to thinking a little bit, I guess. I've done some classes I'm not going to mention what states, but I've done some classes in some other states on, talking about issues, sometimes legal issues, sometimes recruitment retention issues. And I hear the leaders in those departments who will say how difficult it is to recruit and retain. And if you listen to them long enough, I wouldn't want to be a member of their department either. And I don't want to be misunderstood here. I'm not saying that if you have a terrible time recruiting and retaining that you have bad leadership and need to do something about it. It's not a universal statement at all, because you could have the best leadership in the world and just have circumstances that make it difficult for you to recruit and retain. But let me give you just an example here. There's a little town down in the southeast part of Kansas, a little town of Galena. When you leave the east side of Galena, you're in Missouri, and if you go 6 miles south, you're in Oklahoma. So from where I live in Kansas, it's about as far as you could possibly imagine. It's about 6.5, 7 hour drive. It's an old mining town. Believe it or not, we had mining in Kansas. It was lead and zinc mining, and it's all those mines have played out. All that's left, and fortunately they're getting on top of it now, but it was all the overburden, all of the chat piles. Cancer rates very high down in that area. The creeks and rivers were polluted. I mean, they had a lot of things working against them. Galena's a town of about, somewhere around 2,000 people. Chief Bill Hall's been the chief there. He's been on the fire department for 50-some years. Bill actually passed away this last year. His son, Steve, is now the fire chief. So here's a community it's a bedroom community to Joplin, Missouri, because right across the line is Joplin. And so a lot of those people, they work and shop across the line in Missouri. When I was down there about 1.5 years ago for the last time, they were going back to their council to get them to expand the number of firefighters that they were allowed to have on their department, because they had too many people wanting to be on the department. So why is it that Chief Bill Hall can sell ice cubes to the Eskimos? That's always been a big question of mine. But I witnessed firsthand. I was sitting in their fire station, and Bill was sitting there, and some young man came in wanting a burn permit. Before it was all over with, they kicked the same cans, they ran down the same streets, they were related to other people, and for all I know, Bill could have just been filling him with a line. But before it was all over with, that young man would have done anything for Bill Hall that he possibly could, because he made that connection and he made the family connection. I think one of the things that we gotta make sure, we talk a lot about family. Are we doing that in our departments? I think we need to know where people work. We need to know what their kids' names are. We need to know what their kids are involved with. We need to be holding family activities. We need to make sure that the entire family is involved, because I'll tell you what, if the spouse, whether that's husband or wife, decides that this mission that we're on cuts into their family time, cuts into their income, and doesn't comport with what they think is going to make their family, their biological family, work, they're going to make it very difficult on that individual to want to volunteer in an agency. So this is a holistic thing. And I think a little later on, we're going to talk about health and wellness and how this works with behavioral health. So I don't want to get too far into the woods there, but we got to make sure that we're practicing what we say that we are as a family. And I think in a lot of places we don't. And I'm serious. I'm dead serious. There are departments I wouldn't want to belong to. I'd want to belong to the Galena Fire Department because of the way that department functions. It also, on the side of the doors of their trucks, volunteer. On their fire station, which is a half block off of Main Street, volunteer in big letters. I'm not talking small, I'm talking big letters. It says volunteer, so the community knows that they need volunteers. We can talk and we can moan and we can whine about how difficult it is for us to retain or recruit, but if we don't let the civilian population know that we need help, it doesn't do any good if we just keep talking to ourselves. It's like an echo chamber.
Very good point. When I got up to the department in North Carolina, up in upstate New York, I come in with basic fireman 1 and 2, hydraulics, and a high-level rescue. I was the only one in that department that wasn't. What our chief was a city firefighter in a big city that we were right on the edge of, and he was our volunteer chief. And I was the only one who came in with actually high-level certification from the state of North Carolina, high-level rescue certification. And I was acrophobic. I mean, I never thought I could take that class, but I did. And I was glad I did, because I was both a rescuer and a victim from a 6-story building at the college campus. So I was happy I did it. And yet I couldn't have sold ice on a 110-degree day to most of the established members there when I came in. It was like, what's he doing here? Why is he here?
Right.
And I had friends. I mean, there were a few other guys that I became quite friendly with, 5 or 6 other guys. And every time there was a business meeting or something that they knew I had background in or something like that, they'd bring it up and quashed right away. And then when it was election time, I got nominated and I got seconded, but I could never become an officer. The only thing I got eventually was when the year I told you about the fundraiser was I was put on the board as financial secretary, something like that. Yeah. But yet here I was, had 3 out of the 4 courses that the state of North Carolina would have allowed me to be an officer. And yet when I went up to New York, even though I got certified as an EMT and beyond there as well, that was it. I couldn't even I could drive our utility vehicle. Even though I had driven a brand new Pierce engine with a 750 tank, a Pierce, an elongated Pierce with a squirt tower on it, 75-foot squirt tower, and a tanker with a 1,200-gallon tank through rural Guilford County, North Carolina. But God forbid I could be a driver in metropolitan Syracuse area,
right?
Other than the utility truck,
right?
And there were times that I was going to walk away, and my friends would say, "No, come on, you got to stay. We have a good time together. You're here every morning before you go to the office for coffee or chocolate tea. We love talking." I said, "Yeah, but I'm not. I love going on the calls, and I made over 50% of the calls every year that I was there. And even after I got hurt and I couldn't do active calls, they appointed me as the fire inspector for the town, which was great because I got to take 2 new courses and learn more stuff. And I enjoy doing that. But, you know, when somebody new comes in, if you don't get to know them and you just judge them by the way they look, the clothes they wear, you don't look at their attitude toward, like they're gung-ho to be a volunteer, they really want to help. If you don't welcome them in, they're going to come in that bay door and they're going to walk out the side door because they're not going to feel that. If you don't give them that bug, they maybe just have to be interested. They may not have previous experience like I did. They may be coming in fresh. But if you don't let that bug bite them, if you don't help that bug bite them, you'll never get them inside. You'll never get them to stay. Yeah.
I think one of the things that I hear most frequently is it's difficult to get young people involved. They don't learn the same way. They're not motivated. They don't have work ethic. That is such a big bunch of hogwash.
Absolutely.
It is absolutely not true. The young folks that I have on my department, they soak up stuff like a sponge. They are every bit as committed to helping out their neighbors. You know, did they have different learning tools than what we did? Yeah, we had different learning tools than our forefathers did too. But if all you're going to do is talk about how bad the next generation is, you're going to run them off. And,
exactly.
and you cannot afford to do that. So you got to be in tune with that. You got to be in tune with them. And you know, the National Volunteer Fire Council has the Make Me a Firefighter website, makemeafirefighter.org. And the purpose of that is that if civilians sometimes don't know, I even have people in my community who want to know where our beds are in our station, not realizing that, you know, we get out of our beds, we leave our work to go respond. Sometimes we're our own worst enemies, taking the volunteer off the doors because we try and run from that label in some way, which we shouldn't, but we have. So the makemeafirefighter.org website is something that local fire departments can use. Civilians can type in a zip code. They can find fire departments that are in their area that are looking for volunteers. It's a great tool. And there's also a lot of customizable materials for fire departments, because I'm going to tell you that I don't think a single national campaign will do any good. Right. Recruitment and retention, they're local. Mm-hmm. It is up to the local department. Now, we can provide the tools, and we do that through the makemeafirefighter.org, and a lot of the materials that the NVFC has help local departments in many facets of what they do. You look, you know, I think one of the best run recruitment and retention programs that exists right now in the various states run by state organizations is the one that FASNY's got, the Firefighters Association of the State of New York. Right. And why is it that I think that that's been very successful up there? Because it's all tailor-made to each individual community. They make of it what they want to make of it. And I think they've had some real good success, at least from what I see. It's pretty exciting. And, you know, some of that is they're getting their young folks involved and making sure that they know how important they are to the life of that fire department. So, you know, from our fire department standpoint, what do we got to do? How do we attract people? Well, the first off is just what I said. We need them to volunteer, and the only way that we're going to get them to volunteer is to make sure that they know that we have a need there. They have to know that if we don't have volunteers, they could end up with their house burning down, maybe with them inside it, because it's going to take 45 minutes to an hour for the neighbor to respond. They've got to know that if they're upside down in a car, they would like somebody to respond a little quicker, and it may take a little longer because we don't have enough volunteers to get the truck or the ambulance out of the station. And they need to know that if they're having a heart attack, you can't wait 45 minutes for an ambulance or an hour to show up. So that's why they have to volunteer. That's why the civilian population, is it for everybody? No. But there's a lot of people out there who could volunteer some of their time and at least take some of the pressure off of those you know, who are there in their community. So that's the first thing, is making sure that the community knows that you need volunteers. The second way is even if they're not going to volunteer, we talked about money in the first part of this. Um, Even if it's as simple as somebody dropping off a case of water at a local volunteer fire station or career station for that matter. A case of water doesn't, what does that run you? $2, $3, $4, 5? I don't know. I haven't had to buy water for a long time because people keep dropping off water at my fire station. But they need to understand it doesn't take much. We don't need a lot, but there are little things like that. And then I think we got to think outside the box. So you talked about doing direct mail stuff. I need people to do IT work in my station. I may not need them to put an SCBA on, but I need them to do IT work. I most definitely need somebody to volunteer to clean my bathrooms because the guys and gals don't seem to like to do that. And so I end up doing it. I'd love to find somebody that will do that.
I did it.
We need to find that retired truck driver who doesn't want to do interior fire tech, but is perfectly capable of driving that tanker to a fire scene, not in an emergency response mode, but in a support mode. There's any number of things that civilians can do to help us without having to strap a pack on and go inside a building. We need that. Don't get me wrong. But we need to be thinking outside the box about recruitment of other people. It maybe get somebody to take pictures of fire scenes for training purposes or nothing else. I mean, there's just any number of things. So that's the second. The first was making sure that they know that you need to volunteer, that we need volunteers. The second is make sure that they know we need money to do our job. And then the third thing, and maybe it's just because of who I am, but we need to ask for their prayers too, because this is a dangerous business. And thanks to the National Fallen Firefighter Foundation and a lot of the IAFF, the IFC, and the NVFC, and all the other alphabet soup of fire agencies, we've managed to cut firefighter line of duty deaths basically in half in the last 15 to 20 years.
Look at 2019's numbers.
Yes.
50 something. I mean,
yes,
that was amazing.
Yes, but it is still a dangerous occupation.
Absolutely.
There will still be people who will die. There are still people who will get injured no matter how good a job we do. And, I talk a lot about family. My goodness, if there's anybody that we should be taking care of, it's those people who give their all, the last full measure devotion to their community, that we need to make sure that we're taking care of those folks as well. And one of the ways we take care of them is making sure that people are praying for us to stay safe.
And it doesn't matter, it isn't even a matter of which religion you follow.
Oh, yeah.
It's a matter of just giving the prayers from your heart.
Yep.
Prayers from your heart for the men and women who volunteer and our career members as well, because it's just as dangerous. I'm just going to bring up a quick spot, but it falls in here is on the 26th of this month, we're doing a webinar called Mayday, Do You Know What to Do? And it's not about calling the Mayday. It's if a Mayday is called on your emergency scene and you're not involved in the Mayday and you're not on the RID team, do you know what to do? Because most of us, when we hear that Mayday go over the radio, and of course, not every department, but most departments today have radios for most firefighters. You and I know the days when it was either somebody yelling at us or the horns, the air horns told us to get the hell out of the building.
Yep.
But I think that, no, I just lost my train of thought. Okay.
Mayday training.
Oh, yeah, the Mayday training. So you can't react on your gut reaction on the emergency scene. We have 4 instructors, 2 battalion chiefs, a captain, and a well-experienced firefighter to talk about how you have to assess or wait for a command. Yes, if you hear buddies down on the fire scene, your gut reaction is to drop everything and run over there to help, but you can't do that. What if you're on the hose line on the side, on the D side of the structure, and you have 2 guys working the roof? You're going to drop that hose line that's supposed to be protecting them to go. You can't do that. So our class is going to be on the 26th at 6:30. The details are at, and I'll email to you, but it's bit.ly/Mayday in cap letters 2021. And it's on Eventbrite. Tickets are $20. We're giving away a brand new FLIR K2 thermal imaging camera to one registrant who's going to attend. and the net proceeds are going to come to our foundation, so that we can continue to reach out, as we talked about with Ellenwood Fire. We want to. That's our passion. This is what we want to do. We want to help our brothers and sisters.
Yep.
That's why we created this nonprofit, but it's going to be a great class. And if you didn't catch it, folks, if you're listening and you didn't catch the address, the short address, if you go to Eventbrite, you can find it there as well. But you can also just drop me an email to dalmatprod@outlook.com. D as in dog, ALMATPROD @outlook.com, and I'll get you the link there very quickly. But I think what you just said is so important. We're not just part of the community. The community is part of us.
Yep.
And we have to see that it's a symbiotic relationship. That's the only way a good volunteer or part-paid department is going to work, is that if the community and the department are together. Again, I'll take you back to 9/11. We mentioned in the first part, where, yes, as soon as it happened, I was in my office. I watched it because I picked up on the scanner from Fort Lauderdale Fire Radio. Something was happening in New York, and I got our TVs out of the studio, and I had to do something. I want to go up. I knew I couldn't do anything physically because of my back issue, but I figured I could work IT. I could work on computers and help register. There was going to be lots of stuff I knew that was going to have to happen. Well, my partner said, no, you can't go up there. My wife was not going to let me go up there. So I didn't, so I went to the local blood bank, and I donated blood that afternoon. And I said, look, I'm going to organize. We're going to get a lot of people here. Well, how do you know? I said, you better get more people, because I guarantee you people are going to be coming here. This is Tuesday afternoon, the 11th. And I said, you better get some more people here. She goes, well, we'll have to see. We have time. I said, don't wait and see. I'll guarantee you by the time I finish pumping here, you're going to have people coming in the door. And I didn't even have a chance to finish before people were walking in. And right. I said, okay, so, well, we don't have enough yet. I said, fine. I said, I'm going to stay. I'm going to triage the people coming in. I'll check their temperature, check their BP, make sure they're not allergic to anything. They don't have any. I know the routine, believe me. We'll do that. And then you guys will stick them and pump them. That's it. And we didn't get out of there till 9:30 that night. So I said, I'm going to come in early tomorrow morning. Do you have an extra key? I'm going to come in and get everything set up. 6:30 in the morning, I get there. I figured, well, I'll be earlier. No, there's a truck from our local grocery store, a 18-wheeler packed outside with pallets of snacks delivering to the blood bank,
right,
and water. Okay, that was wonderful for that day. And we opened up at 8:30, I think, instead of 9 o'clock, and we were there till after 9 again that night. And that was Wednesday. The Thursday we opened up, and there was one of the big box stores was there with their 18-wheeler and their jack, and brought us 3 pallets of stuff. And I'm saying, oh my God, we didn't ask for a penny. We didn't say to anybody, we didn't announce it anyplace, but here are these 2 community stores, community corporations, who heard what we were doing and saw the lines out our door and came and helped us in those hours of need. Right. Now, again, Thursday afternoons, we got the word that they weren't going to take any more, didn't need donations to go up to New York any longer, which kind of was, cut us to the quick because we wanted to do it. But at least we knew that we had brought in a lot of blood for our community, in greater community, and helped out that way. And the community came back to us and said, thank you, by delivering those goods during that dire time.
Yeah. And why is that? Because we're Americans, the most caring, compassionate people on the planet on this planet.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we have to bring ourselves back there. We have to bring this country back to that feeling that not because we don't want another 9/11, but we want to bring that feeling back of who we are as people. Right. We are one nation under God.
Yep.
We have different opinions, different faiths, different political views, and that's fine. That's what our life was all about. Look at our founding fathers. How long did it take them to agree on something just to get a Declaration of Independence?
Sure.
And how long did it take them to write the Constitution?
How boring it would be if the 2 Steves, you and I, if the entire country looked like us.
Exactly. And thought exactly the same way that we did. We wouldn't be who we are.
No.
It's our community makeup is what makes the people who we are. And look, all my life has been nonprofit, so it's community is the most important thing to me. And I just hope and pray that we have people listening and watching to this podcast when it comes out later this week and say, you know what? I guess I thought about it long enough. Maybe it's time I try it out. No guarantees, but let me at least try it out, go and visit and talk and see what it takes. Yep. And hopefully we can raise some numbers and raise it into both ways, both in the community and to bring in new people. That's the most important thing. All right. I think we've covered that well. You have such a great wealth of knowledge. I'm so glad that I was able to have you with us. And we're going to take, again, a quick break. Again, if you're watching the video, nothing will change for you. On the audio, we'll be right back right after these minutes. And when we come back, we're going to talk about overall health and wellness in the volunteer fire service. Listen, we say the word volunteer, but we know many departments are part pay or paid on call. That doesn't make a difference. You're giving your time, your effort, your energy, time away from your family or your job to help your community. That's what's important. I really don't care how you get there. It's what you do with your heart. You've committed your heart to this task, and that's what we have to do. So we'll be right back right after these words. We're talking about health and wellness with my great guest today, Steve Hirsch, the chair of the National Volunteer Fire Council. We'll be right back. And we're back, and welcome back to this episode of 5 Alarm Task Force. I'm your host, Steve Green, and with me today as my guest is Steve Hirsch, who is the chair of the National Volunteer Fire Council. And, we're in our 5th season, midway now through our 5th season, and I have wanted to do a show simply devoted to the volunteer fire service. And this includes volunteer fire rescue, volunteer fire EMS. I just broaden it by saying the volunteer fire service. And again, as I mentioned before, we don't care if you're part pay or you're paid on call, whatever the case is, you're still giving of your time and effort, and not for a regular paycheck as a career firefighter does. So in this final segment today, we're going to talk about probably one of the most important issues other than our level of membership and finances is overall health and wellness in the volunteer services. And, some people say, well, we're paramilitary. Well, in a way, they're right. We are. We have ranks. We take orders. We're supposed to take orders, and we have people who give orders. But there's more to it than that. We have to be able to fight those fires. We have to be able to go in. You mentioned something very important, Steve, in that last segment about not everybody can go into a working fire. Not everybody's ready for that. And I experienced that on my first fire that I was told I was going to be on the nozzle. It was only 7 weeks into being a volunteer. I'd only had the in-house training at that time. And I got tagged by the captain, turned around and said, Steve, I want you to pull the hose. We're pulling up on the left. So take the left cross leg and pull it. And the guy next to you will back you up. So I turned to him. I said, yes, Cap, got it. And I said to him, you're going to just push into me as I open that nozzle, take that back pressure off. He goes, yeah. So we get there, pull the line, stretch it. Captain says, come on, let's go. We're going to make that entry. We're on the seaside with a kitchen and laundry room fire going. And it's cooking pretty well. And he says, okay. And we were only using, only had 1.5 inches there and 3-inch lines, supply lines in those days. LDH meant something I didn't know about back in those days, right? Somebody's initials. But I did it, and we got it out. We got the fire snuffed, and we shut down the line. He said, hey, give me a pat on the shoulder. He said, you did a hell of a job, first knock. He said, good job, really good job. I turned around to thank the guy next to me, and it was somebody different. And I said, who's that? He goes, why? He says, well, what's his name? Was sitting next to me in the truck in the other jump seat. What happened to him? He goes, oh, go talk to Chief. So I went to the chief, and I said, what happened? Is he okay? He says, yeah, but he just didn't feel that he could make entry with you into that fire. I said, is he all right though? He goes, yeah. I said, you're not going to kick him out? I go, oh, no. He helped us with ladders. He's going to help us on the fire ground. I said, that's amazing. That's amazing to me. I said, he'll be able to stay? He goes, oh yeah. And he got voted in the same night I did, that my partner Rich and I did, and stayed there after I left. He was still there. And he did everything he could to help on a fire ground. Nothing was too dirty. Nothing was too bad. Wherever you need me, that's what I'm going to do. And I think that's an important point. But to do those jobs, we can't be putting ourselves at physical risk. No, I don't mean, yes, there's always risk in the jobs we do. We're making entry into a working fire. We're going into a collapse situation, even a rescue from a car. Something can happen, especially with airbags today, the pistons we're dealing with, hydraulic pistons. You know, you can learn a lot in our trade magazines, wonderful articles in our trades, but nothing beats hands-on to learn. But at the same time, if you're not physically able to do the job, then you could become an impediment to the task. And we don't want that to happen. We want every firefighter, career or volunteer, who's giving of themselves to their community to be able to do the job to the very best of their ability. And that requires overall health and wellness.
Right. So let's break that down into three categories. The first is heart, the second is cancer, the third is behavioral health, and they're not in any particular order at all.
Right.
But you know what you just said, you know, about your experience being, you know, in that first interior attack is exactly what I say. This is a team sport. This is not, you're not in it by yourself, and we're only going to be as strong as the weakest member of that team.
Right.
So our health and fitness is important. And as you talked, I think, I don't know whether it was before we got started or in the first segment, you know, about it's difficult to control the fitness of your volunteers because we don't, you know, we're relying upon them to come in from their jobs and their homes to fight fires. And so we, you know, we can't control their paycheck and their you know, their employment status with us. But, you know, here I'm sitting here and I think I can talk a little bit with some experience on this. 6 years ago, I weighed over 300 pounds, way more than I needed to. And I managed to drop about 60 of that. I've picked up a little bit since then, but not a lot. I feel a whole lot healthier and fit to do the job. And I'm also able to talk to people about fitness and nutrition and stuff. Now my department, because I've not just talking the talk, but I've walked the walk. In my department, again, we meet every week, which is, I think, pretty extraordinary for a little rural outpost fire station in Kansas. We meet every week. So every 2 months, our first meeting, in fact, our meeting tomorrow night, because it's the first meeting of every odd numbered month, is dedicated to health and fitness. And that takes on a lot of different aspects. I remember having a kid on for the first time at the department. It happened to be the health and fitness night. By the way, we serve supper at health and fitness night too, and we try and make it, you know, somewhat in line nutritionally. But this kid, first night on the department, we did a program on dental health. Now, I know when we got done with the meeting, I took him aside and I said, so did you ever think when you become a member of the fire department, the first meeting would be about how to take care of your teeth and your mouth? And he says, well, no, not really. But he said, I understand how important it is. And I said, you know, it's not about your teeth. It is about your teeth, but it's not about your teeth. It's about the fact that I give a damn about your health because I need you to be here. That's my retention. I need you to be here. I need you to be fit for battle because I don't know. It might be in the next couple of minutes the tones will drop. It might be next week. I don't know, but I have to be fit for battle all the time. And so we need to be pushing things like nutrition, talking about diabetics and diabetic conditions, of which I am one. We need to be talking about heart health, all those fitness issues. You know, a lot of departments have gym equipment in them. I do. It doesn't get as much use as I probably would like, but here's the deal is, if it doesn't matter what the subject is, all you have to do is bring this up with a group of volunteer firefighters, and they'll take it and run with it. They'll do way more than what I ever anticipate. And when I talk to them about nutrition, they'll take it and run with it. And they'll do amazing things in their life because it's personal. It's not just some nebulous concept about, oh, we need to be healthier.
Right.
It's about, you need to be healthier. And I can't make you be healthier, but I can give you the tools. But until you want to be, when I was diagnosed as diabetic, I think I said 5 years ago, it's actually 7 because it's actually 8 now that I think about it, because my first grandson was going to be born. And I decided I kind of wanted to be around for him. And the way that I found out I was diabetic was because I talked to the chief, and we started offering health screenings in our department, not mandatory. But we partnered with our local health department, county health department. We told people, if you want to, we'll do blood draws, we'll do prostate screenings, we'll do all that stuff. You won't pay a dime for it, and it's entirely up to you. It's not up, we're not going to mandate it. It's up to you. We're going to give you the tools. And so I did, and my blood sugars were slightly elevated, and I went to my personal family physician, diagnosed as diabetic, went on medication, and then began to shed an awful lot of weight. And it made me much more fit for the battle. And it also made me to where I was a little bit more relevant when I was talking about it. It's really difficult to get up in front of a bunch of people when you're over 300 pounds and tell them that they need to get fit. They'll say, yeah, right. We see what kind of example you are. So, the heart health, I often talk about in Kansas, I would struggle to remember probably the last firefighter who was killed because he was involved in a building collapse or he got stuck in a building, but I can give you lots of names of people who died of heart attacks or who got run over or thrown out of vehicles. By the way, folks, wear your seatbelts. That's a health issue too, and it should be treated that way. But
no excuses.
There's no excuse for that whatsoever. But we just have to keep pushing away at this. And it has to be sold that it's about my members and how much I want them to be members for a long time because I care about them. I spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on my equipment and on maintaining that equipment and replacing stuff. And it ain't gonna do me a damn bit of good if I don't have somebody sitting behind the wheel to be able to take that truck out of the bay.
Very true.
And so their health is very important. And I hopefully that guy that that I talked to and said, this is kind of strange, we're doing dental health on your first note on the fire department. Hopefully I made a point to him was the reason we were doing it was about him. It wasn't about anything else. And ultimately it was about us because that's how we keep people involved. So that's enough about heart. It's a big deal. Obviously it kills volunteer and career firefighters in about the same proportion, percentage wise. So we know it's an issue that cuts across the volunteer and career lines. The second is cancer. And, that's a topic that we've really ventured into with the Lavender Ribbon Report here in the last 2 or 3 years. And I think there's a lot of good stuff that's happening. People need to look at the Lavender Ribbon Report, look at the 11 best practices that are out there. And, can every department implement all 11 practices? Not any more than every department could implement every NFPA regulation either, or a standard. But if you can do 5 of them, that's better than nothing. For myself, I don't know whether, probably people can't see it on the screen. I have to see if I can get my arm up here. I have a scar right there. And that's my Captain Steve Miller scar. Steve Miller was a captain on the Kansas City, Kansas Fire Department career guy. Died of skin cancer 2 or 3 years ago. Good friend. Skin cancer of all things to die of. That's you're not supposed to die of skin cancer. You die of prostate cancer and testicular cancer and lung cancer and all that stuff. You don't die of skin cancer. That's not right. You can die of skin cancer, and people do all the time. And it was, they think it was, related to his profession. When I would go up for my annual physical, and by the way, we want to encourage people to be doing physicals, even if they're doing it on their own dime. If the department can pay for it, great, but it gets pretty expensive, I understand. But every time I go to my doctor, she would say, there's a brown spot on your arm. We need to watch that, make sure it's not getting any bigger. She'd poke at it. And finally, after Steve died of that, I went to my doctor and I said, we're getting that thing taken off. And we did take it off. And I know there were some disappointed people that it's not malignant, so I'm going to survive this thing. But early detection is so important for this. We've got to go in and do physicals. We've got to make sure that, we're doing the blood screenings, things like that. And more importantly, rather than taking care of people after they get cancer, I'd a whole lot rather do things in the fire service that would keep people from getting cancer. And that means the dirty gear that's out there, it needs to go away. We need to have washer extractors. We're very fortunate in Kansas to have a fire marshal who, for the first time in the history of Kansas, the state actually put some money in a grant program for a 2 or 3 year period of time. And he promoted buying washer extractors for fire departments. He got those things scattered all over the state. And we're keeping that gear clean because we know this, it's not my father's fire. We talked, I think, in the first segment about how 1963, when my father started in the fire service in a little community in north central Kansas, no turnout gear, or what little turnout gear they had was probably aluminum stuff that came out of some Air Force base that they were using to fight airplane fires with. They only had 2 or 3 sets anyway. And the first guy was a lucky one because he had to sit there in the fire station and keep blowing the siren. It was the other 2 guys. They didn't have SCBAs. They didn't have hoods. They were responding. But the other thing that they didn't have is everything that was burning was wood and paper. Right. And today that is not reality. Everything that's burning, and I know I'm preaching to the choir, but everything that's burning is a plastic. And when it burns, it changes chemical composition. And, we know that as our equipment, as our personal protective equipment gets impacted with all those particles, all those chemicals, and then we start sweating, and those chemicals open up, the pores open up, and chemicals make way into our body, and it's bad. It's just bad.
I'm very lucky that I was introduced to a team down here in Miami at the University of Miami Sylvester Comprehensive Cancer Center. Dr. Alberto Cabal Martinez and Dr. Natasha Soler, and they've been on several times, and their whole focus is the Firefighter Cancer Initiative. And they travel all over the country doing testing, doing research, and they come back here and they share it with us so we can get it out there. Because once I was naive when I started this podcast at the beginning. To me, in 2016, yes, we knew firefighters were dying of cancer, but I thought it was the people who had worked the pile.
Sure.
We knew that it was bad there. And then one of my early guests was a former Fort Lauderdale battalion chief. And he says, if you talked about firefighter cancer, I said, yeah, well, the pile. He goes, no. He goes, look at this. He showed me his arm. He said, I was diagnosed with melanoma there and had to have that surgically removed. He says that was probably happening because of the fire ground. I had 20 years in. Mm-hmm. I said, really? He goes, oh, yeah. And then he started educating me. And then he introduced me to somebody else and somebody else. I got to the team at UM, and it just became an obsession for me to get the word out about firefighter cancer. And now, of course, I'm riding a big crest with others on the PFAS and PFOS problems in our very gear that we wear that protect us, and the science and debates over that. But the fact is, as you said it so succinctly, is that firefighting today is not what you and I did 30 years ago.
Right.
It's totally different. I mean, the only real hazardous, quote unquote, hazardous material we had in my day were the magnesium wheels on VW buses.
Right.
And we learned that the hard way the first time we put water in.
Right.
Okay, so that was it. Our chief was one of the leading experts on flammable liquid fires, and we 3M loved him. We had tons of 5-gallon pails of AFFF, and our engine, our squirt, and our tankers all had, not only did they carry pails, but they all had foam tanks or reductors.
Sure.
That's the way they were spec'd. And I had never done any. I had no idea about foam other than expansion foam you saw in the movies and television. But we learned all about AFFF and how to use it, and we used it on a couple of big tanker fires that we were on. One we actually got called in by the city because they weren't able to control it. We came in, and within 22 minutes, we had the whole tanker out. But the fact is that in those days, those were dangerous chemicals to us, dangerous products to us. Today, every couch, every chair, every bed, almost anything that burns, unless you're at a campfire and you know it's just tree wood going in there, everything that burns in the buildings and homes that we go into today is carcinogenic.
Yes.
Basically.
And brothers and sisters, you have to wear your gear. There's no two ways about it. You have to wear your gear. You got to make sure you protect those lungs, because once those lungs are damaged, it never comes out. It doesn't heal like a sore. You just got to do it. And then secondly, you have to keep that gear clean. And I'm talking about from not just your boots and your bunkers and your hoods. You got to clean the trucks. You got to clean the tanks. You just have to do that. You have to stop letting people bring that dirty gear inside your living quarters and inside the places where you eat in the fire station. We just cannot do it. We can't have fires and have the community bring us sandwiches and not wash our hands. We just cannot do that any longer. And it's because of the nature of fire. It's just, It's changed. And I don't care if you're on a wildland fire, you don't need to be ingesting all that soot and stuff. Wash your hands. How difficult is that? Hopefully COVID has taught us how to wash our hands. I think most of us knew how to do that anyway. But
not as frequently.
Yeah, we need to do that. So that's the two, the heart, the first, and fitness issues. The cancer, so important. We're probably killing more firefighters with cancer than we are with anything else.
Oh, definitely.
Frankly, if we only knew the truth. The third, though, is behavioral health. It's a stressful business. We see things that people just shouldn't have to see. I often tell people, I said, I want you to sit here, and I don't care how long you've been on, but I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to think back to the worst thing that you could possibly imagine having seen in your lifetime, in your career. And I said, you're just magically transported in time back to that time. You can tell me what it sounded like. You can tell me what it smelled like. If you ever smelt that smell again, you'd know what it was. And over a lifetime, over a career, that begins to work on you. And on the military side of the house, we understand, because the statistics are well known out there about the number of military men and women who take their own lives. It happens multiple times a day, multiple times an hour, frankly. Probably not as well known about how many firefighters and EMTs, and I will include our friends in law enforcement as well, who take their own lives because of the stuff that they've seen and the cumulative effect. It's difficult, because I was telling somebody the other day, I said, even on that car wreck where you were the last person to hold that victim's hand as life went out of it, as they escaped the bonds of earth, that's a difficult thing. But I tell you what, you're doing it boldly, you're doing it compassionately. Even if they can't say thank you, you should understand how important it was for you to be there at that moment in time. God placed you there at that moment in time to do that. So are there things we can do about this? It's one thing for me to say, we need to make sure we're getting fit. We need to make sure that we're washing our gear. We need to make sure that we're dealing with the behavioral health issues. So what can we do about that? Well, just today, I think the NVFC released the toolkit for departments on psychological health. We have on the nvfc.org website a directory of mental health professionals who will help folks who are involved in traumatic events, things that affect their mental health.
Mm-hmm.
We've had our Share the Load program for quite a while, where people can call, first responders can call and be connected with other first responders and help them work through the issues. And now we have a directory of mental health professionals who will service the first responder community. And then there's a toolkit that came out today with all sorts of information for volunteer fire departments. And we don't care if the career folks steal it from us, that's okay, it doesn't matter. We're all in this together.
Exactly.
About making sure that our mental health and I've talked a lot about family here. In my department, I think it was a year ago in December, we had some folks come in and talk about behavioral health, and we didn't just invite the firefighters and EMTs and law enforcement. We invited their wives, husbands, and significant others, because we might see each other once a week in drill. Maybe we'll see each other in an incident scene in between time, and maybe not. But we're not going to notice those changes in how a person is acting and reacting. But a family member will. Mm-hmm. And they have to understand what we're going through and the things they need to be looking for, because it manifests itself in alcohol. It manifests itself in other drug use. It manifests itself in taking it out on the kids and the spouses. And not leaving it at the fire station, but taking it to work with us. It's a big issue. Does that mean that were we weaker than what our parents were? No, I don't think so at all. We keep inventing ways to hurt people, it looks like, and to hurt them in more gory ways than what our fathers saw. So naturally, we're going to react to that. The fire service is, it's the compassion repository of this country, I think, and I would include EMS and law enforcement in that as well. We have such a huge reservoir of compassion for our fellow citizen, but sometimes the water tower runs dry, mm-hmm. and for some people, it does run dry. So, I just implore those leaders in their departments. And when I say leaders, I don't necessarily mean the guy that's got more bugles than anybody else, because in some departments it's the newest person on the block that really is being the leader in the agency. But from the time you come into the fire service till the time you become chief of agency, watch out for the behavioral health issues of your firefighters, because sometimes we can't control when the buildings fall in. Sometimes we obviously can't control if somebody's predisposed to having a heart issue or cancer, but this ought to be an area that we have complete control over. If we provide good quality resources and compassion to the people that serve in our agencies, there's no reason for somebody to take their own life. It is absolutely unnecessary, because there's so many groups out there that are doing some great things. Tomorrow night is our health clinic in our department, and we're going to talk about behavioral health. We talk about it with some frequency, but you have to keep mentioning to people that there's resources out there. You got to hang the Share the Load posters that the NVFC has got with the phone numbers. You got to make sure that people know that there's resources out there. It isn't any different than telling them we'll pay for the blood test to make sure that that if you're diabetic, that you're going to get some help, or if you've got prostate cancer, that you're going to go and get some further testing done. This is about providing information to volunteer firefighters, and if they know that information is out there, they'll run with it, and they'll make sure that maybe it's not them, maybe it's their buddy that's having trouble, who they can hand a card to and say, call this person. Mm-hmm. But again, and I will tell you too, this is an interesting angle on this. I think from a recruitment standpoint, we bring people into the fire service, and what do they think that we're going to do? We're going to put water on fire, wet stuff on red stuff. I mean, that's the fun part of this job. But we also know that that is such a small portion of what we do. We got to be honest with people when we bring them on, that there's going to be some things that they're going to see that they are not going to have ever wanted to see and never imagined that they would see. And we got to make sure that we got to be honest with them about health and fitness. We got to be honest with them about cancer. We got to be honest with them about behavioral health, not to scare them off, but to make sure that they understand that there's resources out there to help them. And more importantly, that they're part of a family organization, a family partnership. I talk a lot about leadership of the family. We just have to make sure that they understand how important they are to our organization and how important they are to the community that they serve, that we're going to go above and beyond and make sure that they stay healthy.
Well, it's so important. When my good friend who was the education director for the Great Florida Fire School, and he invited me to come one year because we had met on social media. He was one of my mentors on social media. He's a captain in his department on the west coast of Florida. We became good friends, and he invited me there. And the second day he says, "Hey, do you feel like you're a firefighter again?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "That's all I wanted for you to just be here for that." So that was good. And then over the winter, he contacted me. He goes, "Hey, you're going to come to the school in 2018?" I said, "Yeah." He goes, "Okay, good. I want you to teach." I said, "What?" I said, "Joe, I've been out for over 35 years. What can I teach?" I said, "I've even spoken in front of a crowd, other than at a funeral, in 20 years, since 1990. He says, "No, you're passionate about stuff in the fire service. You can teach what you're passionate about." So I said, I'm thinking, I'm passionate about firefighter health and wellness and the cancer initiative. So I put together the class, The Elephant in the Firehouse, when ego gets in the way of passion.
Uh-huh.
And the cover of it is actually, you see a nice firehouse, and there's a big butt of an elephant sticking out of one of the bay doors. And I taught it that first year, and I had five students. But okay, I had 5 students. I was glad to have it. I come out, and the next day, the people at the desk said, "Okay, you have to sign these certificates for students." I said, "Who am I to sign the certificates? I just taught a class. I'm not a five." He says, "No, you're the instructor. We're enrolling you now in the state fire college as an instructor." So I got certified as an instructor by signing those documents. And then I came back the following year. Then I had 12 people in it. One repeat from the year before because he liked it so much.
Yeah.
And it covers just that. We can't let our egos get in the way of the passion. And
Right.
that applies to everything you and I have spoken about today, about the fire service. And again, whether it's career or volunteer, I call them the first domino. You're not feeling well, you haven't felt well in a while, but you're the life of the party at the firehouse. You're the first guy out the door. You have to drive the engine, or you have to take that first line in. But you've had a few pains in your arm, but you just wave it off. It's nothing. I'm just getting a little older. And then you go in, you got to work and fire, and you're going to take that nozzle in, the first one, and the officer gives you the pat on the back, says, "Let's go in," and you cross that threshold and you fall flat on your chest, grabbing your chest. I said, "You're the first domino."
Yep.
Because now the guy behind you doesn't know what's going on. The officer is stuck. The line is dead, but you have other teams working the house. And a Mayday has to be called. And now everybody's job on the fire ground changes from what it was just assigned. The chief came in, chief officer came in, whoever the IC was, you do this, you do this, you do that. And now you can't. Nobody can do that. And what if we have a rescue going on at the same time in that house? What do we do? The first guy in falls off when he knew he wasn't well because he had that ego. We can't let ego get in the way of our job as firefighters. And I say job, whether you're a career volunteer. It's what we do. It's a job to us to protect our communities. That's the job we accept when we took our oath.
Yep.
And so we can't let that get in the way, whether it's behavioral health, whether it's physical health, whether it's just being a good person in the firehouse, man or woman, makes no difference. You have to be that. You have to be somebody that someone else can turn to and look to you and say, hey, can I ask you a question? Because we're way beyond what was it, a 1980, no, 79, my first real bad call, where when I reacted to when I got back to the firehouse by running into the locker room, throwing up, puking, crying, and come out, kind of wash my face to make it look better. And the driver of the engine, the company that I was on, because we were the first two, says, are you okay? And I said, yeah. He says, was it this call? And I said, yeah. He goes, suck it up.
Yep.
We're way beyond suck it up now.
You bet we are.
Okay. We have to be able to reach out. We have to feel free to take care of somebody else. And we have to feel free, if we don't feel well mentally or emotionally, to tell somebody else about it. Yep. Even if it's not an officer or your chief, find your clergy person. Go to them. Go to your personal physician and talk with them and listen. They have big shoulders and big ears too. It's not just you and me who are willing to listen to people. There are thousands of people out there who want to help first responders. 9/11, if there was just these small slivers of silver out of 9/11, that people, the citizenry of this country, saw the job that we do. Saw 500 firefighters arrive at a building, at a major site, looking up to 90 stories, knowing they weren't going to bring water there, knowing there was no roof rescue available, and said, we're going up those stairs anyway. That changed America. We saw that by the way people were driving around with the flags. And that's where we have to get back to again, to let people know the jobs that we do, whether we're career or volunteer, why we do it, and how important it is to us.
Yeah, and we can't help somebody else without without helping ourselves.
Being 100% right, and that's what we say. That's part of the class, and we use this phrase on the podcast all the time. If you don't take care of yourself, how can you take care of anybody else?
Yep. On my fire station, on the training room whiteboard, it says, would you want to be the person to rescue you?
That's great.
It's pretty succinct.
That's very succinct.
Yeah. And that wasn't one that Hirsch wrote up on the board. It was one of his guys wrote up on the board.
Well, you know what? I can't think of a better way to close the podcast with that phrase. Could you repeat it again for us, Steve?
Yep. Would you want to be the one to rescue you?
Great.
Yep.
Great way. Steve, I can't thank you enough for taking the time. I didn't even know we were going to go this long, but it's been a great podcast. The information that you've provided today and the leadership and guidance you provide to the NVFC, and the time it takes with everything else that you do, the time you still devote to the NVFC is amazing, and the job you're doing there. And as I told you, the volunteer department volunteer side has always been most important to me because that's where I served. And to see how the NVFC has grown and expanded in the years since I first got connected in 2016, way back when, and started trying to promote it on the podcast and getting the emails and watching, going to the website and hearing more and more stuff about it. I'm just so proud of the organization and what it does today. I only wish that, it may have been there back then in our early days. I just maybe didn't know about it, and our department didn't know about it, but I can only imagine what good would have come had it been, even at the early stages back there, that could reach out to volunteer departments.
Now, the NVFC celebrates its 45th anniversary next year. And so we've been around for a while, but it takes a while for organizations to grow up and become as strong as they are. And we're only as strong as those volunteer firefighters out there who commit themselves every day to protecting their neighbors and their communities.
And that's what it is. They're dedicated. No matter what else they do in their life, they've made this choice to protect and serve their communities and save lives and property.
Yep.
That's what it's all about.
Nothing more rewarding.
Absolutely. Other than your first child or your first grandchild, right?
Well, grandchild. No, I love my kids, but the 5 grandkids really change your life. You know?
I've heard that from my brother, uh, who, from what I hear, might soon be might be great. I don't know, but we'll see.
Yeah,
But
you know, probably I know we're running a little long here, but the one last thing I want to
sure,
talk about too, because I want to make sure that I don't forget this, and sometimes I do. You know, I've got a wife who has enabled me to do this job, you know, as a volunteer firefighter, and then, you know, working my way up as chairman of the NVFC. But my wife isn't any different than the thousands and tens of thousands of spouses out there, husbands and wives, who support their better half in what they do. I don't think people completely understand what kind of a sacrifice that my wife made and everybody else's spouses have made.
mine as well.
I was, you know, Christmas Day, I'm off fighting a grass fire. Left and you know, 10 minutes down the road, because it was about 20 miles out, I called my wife and said, oh, by the way, I'm not going to be there for the rest of Christmas because we're out on this call. And I don't think people, sometimes even firefighters, don't totally understand the sacrifices that their spouses and their kids make
Right.
for us to be involved in this. And, you know, my helmet's off to them. They are such an important part, and we need to make sure that we tell them that.
I couldn't have done, even when I got the application, he says, "Were you ready to sign it?" I said, "No, sir." He says, "Why?" I says, "I have to discuss it with my wife."
Right.
Let her know. She works too, and I work, but I got to let her know. I got to discuss it with her. It's a partnership.
Right.
We had no kids during the first 4 years, so it wasn't problematic. We got up to New York. That's when our girls were born. But you're absolutely right. I mean, there were times that I had to leave. I just found out a few years ago that I had to get up and leave from a family holiday dinner for a working house fire. And, you know, yes, it was a holiday dinner, and we had family from out of state visiting. But I also knew that when the pager went off and was reported as a working house fire, as opposed to smoke showing or, you know, unknown smoky smell, working house fire, we need to get every piece out that we could.
All hands.
All hands. And I left. I didn't think anything of it. I came back a couple of hours later. They were still, you know, they were still at the house because they were staying with us. Uh, Nobody said anything. You know, how was it? You know, my one of the people asked, you know, tell me about it. You know, what was it like? What'd you do? And one of my nephew asked me, he was young and very, you know, easily influenced at times. So he saw my helmet and he loved that, and my coat. And it was only a number of years ago that I found out that one of those relatives has held that against me ever since the early 1980s, because I got up and left to go to the fire department.
Mm-hmm.
I said, no, I didn't leave to go up to the fire department. And I said, and by the way, I've visited you many times. You've had us over many times in your home in that state. I said, your only protection are 2 volunteer fire departments.
That's right.
I've taken your son to that fire department to visit and showed him all the apparatus. And, you know, once I tell the guys I'm a volunteer, they just welcomed us in. And he climbed over, he turned on the lights, he hit the siren. I said, they're volunteers. They do what I just did that night. I said, that's who I am. I took an oath to protect. This is work. I said, if it was a working house fire at your home, God forbid, would you want somebody to say, "No, I got some family over. I'm not gonna go." And what if that you're that one that was needed on that call? So they make a tremendous sacrifice. And as you said, a lot of people just don't understand the sacrifice that our families make when we make that commitment.
Right.
And I again, I will say that before you join, I advise from my heart, make sure if you have a significant other, sit down with them before you sign the paper and tell them what you're thinking of doing and why you want to do it. And explain to them that it could take you away from family and good times, you know, during events. But, you know, you'd want the community to help you if you were in that same same case. So
Yep.
I,
Well, let me end, Steve, with telling you God bless you for what you're doing.
well, thank you.
And I just ask through 2021, since we're doing this here on the 4th of January, recording this, is that, God bless all of our firefighters, the EMS and law enforcement professionals across this country in the job that they do. And I just pray that they'll have a safe year, that it'll be a better year than the 2020 certainly seemed to be. But, even at that, 2020 wasn't that bad in hindsight. It taught us a lot of things. And we just have to realize that God's always there blessing us in everything that we do.
We just have to remember to be open to receive those blessings.
Indeed.
Yeah, we can't be so stubborn. So, Steve, again, my sincere thanks. Like I said, reach out to me for anything I can do to help out. Okay, any way along the line. I appreciate your time. I appreciate all the work you do, not just for the NVFC, but for the thousands of volunteers in this country. Thanks so much. Look forward to it. I'll be shooting you a note as soon as we're up and on the air later this week.
All right. Thank you.
My best to Kimberly as well. All right.
Okay.
And to Chief Kamarick as well, too.
All
Stay
right.
safe. Stay well, my friend.
All
Take
right.
care. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hi, this is Steve. I just want to take a moment to remind you about our webinar coming up at the end of the month. We hope that you will join us on January 26, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. for our webinar, Mayday, What Do I Do? Most of us have learned how to call a Mayday, but few of us have been trained on what we are supposed to do if we're not involved in the Mayday itself and we're not on the RIT or RIC team. So our presenters will be Battalion Chief Andy Starnes of Insight Training, LLC, Battalion Chief John Dixon of Instructor John Dixon, Captain Joe DeVito, Fort Myers Beach Fire Protection District, and firefighter Nick Higgins of the Firehouse Tribune. Tickets are $20. They're available at Eventbrite, or you can use this short link to get there, which is bit.ly/Mayday in all capital letters and the number 2021. So Mayday 2021. And all the information is there, and the net proceeds will help go to benefit first responders in dire need. So again, we hope you'll join us Wednesday, January 26th at 6:30 p.m. Mayday, What Do I Do? Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. And we'll be back very, very soon. Stay safe and stay well. Take care, everyone.